I think all colors and all kinds of ideologies got together. There is a strong moment about how, as I said, the Islamic elements were supporting that. But I don't think politically they're aligned, because NCP wants to stand on its own. I don't know before elections they're going to have because by themselves their electoral, I would say, future is limited at this point of time, lack of experience and all of that.
Welcome to the Gist on Stat News Global. I'm Ramananda Sen Gupta. Our very special guest today is Dr. Sreeradha Datta, who teaches international relations at Jindal University. And we're going to be talking about Bangladesh. Thank you so much for joining us. So delighted to have you with us.
Thank you.
You've just returned from Bangladesh. What kind of a mood did you sense there?
There is, I think, hope and anticipation for elections, first and foremost. They did declare February, but one wasn't sure. One still is not sure, actually, because, of course, there's always that particular black swan moment or something like that. But I spoke to a variety of persons from different political parties, and they all mentioned that they all want election. But, and of course, this is, tentative date is on the 10th to 12th February or something like that. There was a bit of impatience with the governance issues, the mobocracy, violence on the road. Also, these sudden jams. What has happened, and I faced it also, Dhaka jams are, it's like been there for centuries, I think, and nothing's ever changed. But this time I saw there were these sudden eruption of people. In fact, the day I landed was the day when the students had a procession about the BUET degree, the engineering degree versus the technical degree, which I understand. But the point is now everybody's just coming onto the road. In fact, the day I was leaving Dhaka, people were calling me because we were suddenly out of the, and this was, I don't know whether it was planned because nobody had any information. A particular section of the RMG had come onto the road in protest for some demand or the other. So this is something that's, nobody is really happy about. I mean, people understand that they're disgruntled, their grievances, the establishment is not in a position to listen. But every time you bring it on the road, you disrupt daily routine. Everybody has to go to work and go to school and universities. That's something. And of course, the violence, pockets of violence that has happened on and off constantly. I think that is another issue. But in all honesty, Ramananda, what I've noticed is, and I've said this earlier, that many friends I spoke to in Dhaka and outside, they say that at least there's some breathing space in Bangladesh now. Like you can speak. And I also caution against the fact that we've seen a lot of arrest, unnecessary, what we think sitting here. We don't know why they were arrested and people like that. They're still under detention. While all that is also true, so at times it seems like there's a political witch hunt. It seems. I'm not sure whether that's really, because there are some kind of reasons as to why some were arrested. But a lot of people say that though these are difficult times, but at the same time, it's certainly better than what it was earlier.
What it was earlier, as in during Hasina's time.
That's right.
But, I've also been hearing that the students who organized this whole thing, they want a say in the political dispensation that comes in. Have they managed to get that kind of a political system in place for them to contest? And
so clearly they were part of the interim, right? Two of them. One has now walked out. There are two there. They used to be three earlier, and some portfolio other. But what also Nahid walked out because he's founded the NCP along with some of the other members. NCP, as we know, in the recent Dhaka University election didn't do well at all. Also, I remember when my previous visit to Dhaka in November, there was some, procession or a kind of a meeting that they had organized, when there were hardly any audience really. But this time I'm told, because just a month ago they had organized few district, kind of a nationwide kind of a rally, people came. So people are now willing to listen to them and all of that. But it is not so easy because, the political system is very well entrenched in Bangladesh. So for a new, group to kind of break in, it's tough. But on the other hand, I've also been saying that I'm actually very supportive of fresh blood entering Bangladesh politics. But often I think, there's a kind of a unsureness about their trajectory, in the uncertainty about how this will pan out. There are also a lot of conversations and political perspectives, I don't know which are correct or not, that a lot of them are very closely aligned with the more conservative Islamic groups. That may be so, one doesn't know, because people give you examples, but it's difficult to actually agree to that. I've also spoken to a few of them. I in fact recently attended the conference which is organized by this young group, and some of them are so articulate and so wise. And I've also said this earlier, when the uprising was going on, I was listening to students sitting in Germany, their Deutsche Welle interviews, sitting in US, their interviews there in the local Bangladeshi channels and everything. They have a vision for Bangladesh, which is away from the corrupt practices, away from, kind of we've seen that family hierarchical system that, so they had wanted to break away from all of that. So which I think is certainly what any nation state requires.
You mentioned, slightly conservative views from the students. Does that mean that they had the support of the Jamaat?
So I've had a very interesting conversation with Dr. Tahir, who's the vice president of Jamaat political party. So I asked him what happened. I want to know, because if you recall, I was one of the first ones who was saying that, after that Abu Said killing happened, that now it's difficult for Sheikh Hasina to, she needs to go because of the circumstances which are going to. Of course, it was very early in the day, and I probably had, in fact, it was on a few channels, I think I spoke about this. But at the same time, what we saw was that I really felt it was a complete movement from the ground, completely indigenous to Bangladesh. I have absolutely no doubt about that. And students from across, especially after the Abu Said, incident, I think all across nationwide students came out. What Dr. Tahir explained, that amongst those students, of course, the Shibi students were also part of that, and which is true, because they are also Bangladeshi, right? And he says the Shibi was kind of very ably supporting this movement. I mean, they were quite clear that this is not acceptable. And as you know, Shibir is very organizationally strong. Shibir, Jamaat, the entire line from top to bottom, which this group wasn't. So I think there was that sense that the Shibir group were already organized, already knew how the template is. They probably supported them in some form or the other. But to say that, which again there has been a very regular narrative, especially from India, that every person who's been part of the student uprising is from that. I don't think so. I think all colors and all kinds of ideologies got together. There is a strong moment about how, as I said, the Islamic elements were supporting that. But I don't think politically they're aligned, because NCP wants to stand on its own. I don't know before elections they're going to have because by themselves their electoral, I would say, future is limited at this point of time, lack of experience and all of that. And as I said, nobody really knows them, understands them, except that they were part of this movement. They were also part of an earlier movement, which I've also witnessed, which is known as the road safety movement. That is again a very quietly done, no violence. They just got together, held hands, and tried to ensure some road safety measures are being introduced. It was many of those students who actually graduated into this particular movement. But whether it's going to be completely, subsequent in the electoral coalition that emerges, whether they're going to be aligned closely or not, I don't know. But as of now, they haven't said so.
Mm-hmm. Let's stick to the Jamaat for a second. Like in Pakistan, the more radical sort of, or some would call it rabid elements of these militant outfits, they seem to have more street power than real political power. And I think that was the case with the Jamaat too, when they tied up with the BNP and things. Is that still the case now, or is the Jamaat now turning into an actual political power?
Yes, in fact, I remember there was, I think and I'm not sure which organization did the poll, but Daily Star had published this few months ago where they had given BNP a head start in terms of the electoral prospects. Almost 28% difference between Jamaat and them. Recently, another Bengali newspaper did another polling where the gap is about 8% now between BNP.
Okay.
I also had a friend who told me that it's been recently another poll which has been conducted, hasn't been published as yet. They're, I think, doing the final. I don't know what they're planning to do with it, which gave Jamaat an edge, which we were sitting few of us, and so many were like, oh really, I mean, how is that possible? Because there is especially the Bangladeshi, the friends that we have in the urban location, none of them are, they are like you and me, doing the regular thing, and they don't have that. I mean, they are Muslim by identity, but it doesn't mean they support these conservative elements and all of that. But what I feel, and I think that's the change, because right now, Bangladesh has a very strong, between 16 years to 28 years is, I think, 28% of the population, right? So that's a large number. Also, the first time voters are about 4 lakhs this time. Now, please remember the last 2 elections, none of these children were allowed to vote, right? So they have an angst about Awami League. But more important, the reason Jamaat's prospects may improve in these elections, as the poll seems to be saying, is because for whatever it is, of course, we know we always look at Jamaat through a lens of violence, and the whole Pakistan history kind of befuddles us in that sense. But at the same time, I think, as you mentioned very correctly, that they have very strong organization across all the districts, very disciplined. There is no family hierarchy at all here. So there is a way, and this time, I mean, when I reached Bangladesh, the first TV, was full of these young Shibir, and of course all the panelists, but also Shibir students who were there. They wear regular shirts, jeans. So this is the new generation of Jamaat students or Shibir, as you saw. So they don't have the typical conservative look about them. They're speaking very clearly about what their vision of Bangladesh is. There is a chance, I feel, that the young Bangladeshi, especially who's lost their lives, who's lost friends, families in this uprising, they don't want to go back to the same entrenched system that Bangladesh had. And clearly, in the aftermath of the 5th August uprising, with exit of Awami League from the political space, we've got clearly a lot of bad reports from all over Bangladesh about how other political parties jumped into it. The same chadabaji, as we call it in Bengali, have been attributed to, especially BNP, because they are really the main guys there. So, but I haven't, and generally as of now, and I don't know whether that's again 100% true, that Jamaat has a very it's like a corrupt-free image as of now. Also that they have different ways of working. Of course, Dr. Tahir, as I mentioned, kept telling me that show me an instance where Jamaat has been part of this violent activities or initiated violence. I talked about the 32, house, the Dhanmondi being taken away and all of that. And he says that students from across the political hues joined that, which is true, because I did speak to students from the university campuses in my earlier visit, and they did say that everybody at that point of time was so kind of that angst about Sheikh Hasina, and of course it fell on Mujib and all of that. So maybe if Jamaat is trying to position themselves as a different political party, as I said, their makeover changes. It is also true, like this time, I think for the first time, we've seen Jamaat women leaders who are not wearing the typical headgear and all of that. But a very prototype picture that somebody brought to my notice was about how the ambassador of UK hosted a party for Jamaat leaders, women leaders, and you could barely see them. It's just the slit eyes, really. So clearly that attire conservatism is there, and I'm not sure that all of Bangladeshis would want to fall into that category. I asked Dr. Tahir about whether, suppose you win elections, are you going to bring in Sharia laws? And he says, where did you get that idea? I said, we always think that. He said, what is Sharia firstly? And why would we want? And then he started to explain to me what Sharia laws were. And he says, where has this come up? So I also asked him about the point of they had a different point of view about liberation war, right? I just saw a statement even yesterday, I think one of the newspapers so they've moved away from their erstwhile position. about how liberation war was not accepted by them, was not recognized by them. This is Bangladesh is here. So this is liberation war obviously brought them Bangladesh. So I'm just saying they are also very tactically moving away from erstwhile positions, which will now endear themselves to a larger, because many people had completely moved away from or didn't have anything to do with Jamaat because they bring in a value system which most Bangladeshis don't relate to. So they are, I think, slowly trying to change that. Dr. Tahir talked about how 43% of their party members are women. But I did mention, but you're so like segregated. I mean, that kind of a thing. And they have a point of view. I, in fact, mentioned that last time when they were in the coalition, football, girls, young girls, school girls playing football was stopped. So he said there was an attire issue. So I said, but look at Olympics. There's so many, Muslim countries being represented there, all girls, boys, and so it's just an attire issue, right? So he says, yeah, and he talked about how in their religion there's a certain decorum about what you wear and things like that. But I said you can't impose that, right? Because generation these days, the Gen Z across the world looks the same. I mean, shorts and black T-shirt is their uniform. So how do you expect this? And then I also gave him an example about one girl whom I know. I'd heard about that she's part of the RMG. She goes to work every day, and I was told by Jamaat workers, they forced her to wear the head cover. And I mentioned that to him. He says, no, we don't force. We kind of try and impress upon them. So I said, it's a very fine line because people get scared because when you come in, like that. So those are things that, of course, is happening. But at the same time, through their, in terms of their political plan, their strategy, if they can kind of position themselves differently and they've always done that. But as I said, as you mentioned also, electoral mandate has never been in favor. But because I think this new generation is now going to denounce the politics of the past. And post-August, as I said, BNP didn't show up in a great light in terms of the same machinations that we've seen political parties do before. So there would possibly be a kind of a shift, possibly.
You mentioned, that the earlier time when the BNP was in power, and I think, attended my first sort of visit to Bangladesh when BNP was in power for a SAARC summit. And I remember one of the MPs there telling me that, look, we got independence not on the basis of religion, but on the basis of language. And we don't wear our religion on our sleeve.
Yeah.
And people who had gone from Bangladesh to Afghanistan to fight, when they came back, when the Americans bombed Afghanistan, said, we don't even allow them to preach and promote here. Do you think that has changed, that attitude?
There is a lot of cultural nest to the Bengali cultural thing. But again, as I said, in terms of physically, I've been, and so have you, I think, going to Dhaka, Bangladesh for many years. I've seen how earlier one didn't see so much of cover. Women with their, now there seems to be a lot many, much more visible. I'm not sure just because they're changing their attire, are they becoming more religious in that sense? That's a question that I think we all grapple with. Also in terms of, so I mean, I remember earlier when I used to be working in IDS and we used to hold a lot of these track tour and meetings and all of that. So even during Eid, when Bangladeshis would come, because when you're traveling, then those Eid rules don't apply. You don't have to necessarily fast. So I'm saying 20 years ago, they were not fasting when they were traveling. But now when a Bangladeshi delegation comes, or I met them in Delhi during Eid time, they're very severe about the rules. They don't even drink water, leave alone food and all of that. They follow the normal set, whatever is acceptable according to them. So those things are changing for sure. And a lot of young girls across the universities, taking to headgear and all of that. But there are also a handful of people who are still wearing sari, bindi, very culturally alive. Also, in fact, the election poll I saw, and that's something, again, if you've been there in Dhaka before elections, it's a very joyous occasion, like singing, dancing and all of that. You saw the uprising. I mean, out of that Rajakot word, the kind of poetry and music they, turned out. So similarly here, it was the campus came alive with, bright colors, activity. So you found people in the conservative attire, and you also found regular students wearing jeans and kurtis and all of that. Now, how much of that is a reflection of the fact that you're saying that religious identity is becoming the core? But I think, and this is something that I've learned from others like Ambassador Dev Mukherjee, religion was always important and critical to them. I think for us, we kept used to say that this has disproved the two nation theory, right, the coming of Bangladesh. But I'll go with Rehman Shobhan, I'll go with Dev Mukherjee, who would say that it wasn't. Religious identity was always there. It's just that the cultural identity was completely subjugated, and that they didn't want to stand for, that we will stand for our cultural rights. So it's a kind of a parallel track. I think is to romanticize, somehow we want to believe it like that, but genuinely I think, Ramanand, the two tracks were simultaneously running.
Oh yes, I sense that too. I actually had people, vegetable seller telling me that I wish we hadn't separated from Pakistan, because we would still be able to then practice our belief and not be not lose our Muslim identity.
Yes, yes.
Right? But coming to, let's say, bilateral relations, you were among the first to sort of, publicly proclaim that, we made a mistake by, or we put all our eggs in one basket by supporting Hasina. Right now, do you think Bangladeshis also see us through that Hindu-Muslim prism?
The problem of going with Hasina, of course, we know why we went with Sheikh Hasina, right? The kind of problems we've had from Bangladesh in 2001 to 2006, the anti-Indian activities was impossible. And we tried really hard. I think the government tried every measure and mechanism to see we could do some commercial deal, economic trade. Nothing was working with that government. And then, of course, the interim period of the caretaker government and 2008 December, overwhelming majority that Sheikh Hasina got clearly. And then, of course, even before that famous 2010 summit, bilateral summit, she addressed our security core concerns, unpacked all those Indian insurgent camps in Bangladeshi soil, opened up the arms hall case or Chittagong arms hall case. So clearly she understood that this is our core concern. It's not unknown to anyone. So which is why we completely read the red carpet out. My problem is not that. I totally understand, and that is national for us, a core concern. So any government who recognizes, addresses it, we would want to do that. But what in the process we did was that, it appeared as if Bangladesh was giving us things that we always wanted. We were not addressing their concerns. I'll tell you what, there are two main reasons why I say this. Yes, they gave us transit. If you remember, it was really a bad word earlier. Nobody used to, transit. Sheikh Hasina was strong enough to do that and, bring back the secular cultural norms of the society back again and all of that. So clearly she was working very hard. She also, and I recall this, whether it was in administration, whether it was in police service, there was a lot more minorities that were visible in, different places and positions. So clearly those kind of things, which was something working in India's favor. But there were some core issues apart from the larger of trade, transit and all of that Bangladesh has. One is water and water sharing, and the other one is the border killing or border, movement. Now, in 2011 or 2012, India brought down almost every tariff barrier and non-tariff barrier except for contraband items. I think about 6 or 8 items were left, and a lot of non-tariff barriers even continue to exist today. But whatever, India did attempt to bring that down. So obviously the smuggling and all that did lessen. But again, as you know, we are all aware of many cough syrup plants on the border region and all of that, which is why that smuggling. So they have constantly pointed to us that why are, people using, in many track tours we've heard and I've been part of, that rubber bullets should be used by these. So, and then of course, I remember a particular of the border security force, a higher official went to Dhaka and he said, oh, these are done in self-defense. which clearly didn't go down well. Nobody does this. I mean, they don't shoot. I mean, they are in a position of strength in terms of, but of course, there's a visibility issue. You can't make out in the terrain who's who. So, in fact, there are a lot of Indians we kill in the process, right? So, this is something which is, and you remember that horrible thing, I don't want to mention one, unfortunate incident about a young girl and all of that.
Oh, yes.
There has never been a kind of how shall I say, the case has been going on for several years in Indian court and all of that. So all that has left a very deep wound. Like two friendly neighbors, you're partnering on so many things together. How come this can't be addressed? I don't know why this conversation didn't have. The other is water sharing. Now we know Ganges, of course, happened thanks to Sheikh Hasina again in 1996. It's up for renewal by next year. Teesta, we are aware of the issues about Teesta state, West Bengal politics and all of that. But I really think that's not the real picture. I mean, I'm just saying that West Bengal has issues about it. But the point is that it's a management of water, right? It's during your lean season of 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, maximum 12 weeks, not even more than that. Why are two friendly neighbors not able to deal with that? Why are two friendly neighbors not able to? We talked about having a river basin management in 2010. 2024, we had heard no progress on it. Water sharing, it's not that just because we've not signed an agreement, water is not going into Bangladesh. That's not the issue. The issue is the mental cobweb they have. So if Sheikh Hasina is doing so much to address the cobwebs that Indians have in terms of transit and other issues, why is it that we were not addressing that? They were doing a lot of good work, and people often question me, oh, it was government to government, not people. No, everything that India and Bangladesh were working together was giving, dividends to the people. Who's using the railway road? Who's using the cargo movement and all of that? But there was certain mental, and as we always know that Bangladesh is a very politically aware. Whether you talk to a shopkeeper, rickshaw, auto, you talk to everybody has a point of view, and that little anger and angst about India just kept swelling that. And there's a very natural, I mean, one can't counter that Sheikh Hasina was going out of her way. She was fighting with everybody to do things, to work, collaborate with India. How come India wasn't taking that extra step? It seems to that. And that was one of the reasons why I think we've seen that kind of anger about it. And so, which is why I say that we seem so closely aligned, but not addressing Bangladeshi's core concerns, which is what my point always has been.
Mm-hmm. We are almost running out of time, so I'll ask you two quick questions in succession. One is that the perception here about, Hindus being sort of penalized or whatever it is out there, how much of that is actual fact? And how much of that is due to the fact that most Hindus were Awami League people, so hence there is also that part of a thing. And number two, without the Awami League being allowed to contest, would you really have a free and fair election there?
Okay, so your first question is about the Hindus. As I did mention earlier, Sheikh Hasina had tried to ensure their representation in a lot of other services and elsewhere. But what we saw, and I did a small project on the Sundarban region many years ago in 2014-15, and every household I would go to, you would have the bride who was from Bangladesh, because they said any girl, Hindu girl above 16 years is not safe anymore. This is 2015 I'm talking about. So clearly, much of the problems of the Hindus has continued for years. We didn't talk about it at that time. We, of course, talked. You remember 2001 election when BNP came to power. Within few hours, there was a huge outbreak of violence, and I think there was a quick rush by an Indian leader and all of that. And then but over the years, gradually, we've always seen, especially on the border region, it's a local goon who want to take away your land, your house, ensure you're feeling unsafe. So that problem has remained. And in fact, many have said that often, Hindus are very Awami loyalists, but there are many of these local Awami goons on the ground who've also been part of that. So it's not that they were outsiders. So Hindu violence is not new in Bangladesh. It didn't suddenly happen. But as you mentioned on the 5th August, post 5th August, I think the anger was about Awami League. Anger was about Sheikh Hasina, and which is why a whole lot of Hindus paid for it also, because they're all Awami League loyalists. So that, kind of, but again, I think we really need to remember that both Professor Yunus, as well as the student leaders, and I did speak to a lot of Hindus after that, especially people from the temples and all of that. They did say that they were guarded, they were trying to safeguard, blocking entry of others and all of that. So there was attempt by the interim at that point of time and student leaders to prevent that. But it is true that Hindus right now also, because of the fact that we feel it's been such a overtly, and which wasn't there earlier, right? The overt Islamic elements on the road. So there is a feeling of being nervous. They're feeling that they're unsafe. They're going to be. So that continues. And I don't know how one can. But of course, first time in history of Bangladesh, we've seen Hindus do a march on streets of Dhaka. So that's also new. And maybe a different element is emerging in that sense, that they won't feel that fear and insecurity. I think the establishment has to convey that very strongly to the Hindus, that you're also wanted and equally as anybody else. They do say it, but it's often at a rhetorical level. It doesn't percolate down. So that's the thing. Your second question was about?
Without the Awami League being allowed to contest.
Yes, no, I completely agree. Awami League is a historical political party. I mean, how can you have a multi-party democratic elections without Awami League? I totally agree with that. But under the circumstances, at this point of time, I don't think this election there's a likelihood. Let's not forget the elections of 2018-24. Where there was only Awami League fighting against Awami League, right? Which we were okay with. But it's true, those were one-sided, and this maybe will also be a bit one-sided. But again, BNP of course has publicly said that they want Awami League to come to the elections. We know that's a political numbers that they're looking at, and, to dilute the other political entities. But as I mentioned, the large youth they're irrespective of political parties. I mean, Ramanath, one point, 24 January election, I was in Dhaka that day. Official figures are 28% voters turnout or something like that. On the streets of Dhaka, I was out on the road from 9 o'clock in the morning till about 6. I went to almost as many booths as possible. There wasn't more than 10-12% voters turnout. There was hardly any turnout. I'm just being generous by giving you 10%. So of course the rural may have been 28%. So I'm saying even at that time, Awami Leaguers didn't come out to vote for Awami Leaguers. So it is one-sided, right? So here also the fact that Awami League, which is a large political party rooted in history, will look a bit strange. But given the mood of these youngsters here, because they said on what basis, he said, what about the lives lost? That was done because of Sheikh Hasina. And now you expect her political party to be back in the electoral foray? I mean, is that what is justice all about? I mean, they were very angry. And I've had students I've interacted with who's got still tears swelling up with the activities and what happened between in the month of July until 5th August. So that's not something, that memory is not going to go away immediately. So this time election, if it does take place, I hope it does, it's going to be without Awami League as I see it. But hopefully in future, I do think Awami League is a political party that can't be wished away, and it should never be wished away. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, one last quick question before we close. Relationship is not going to go back on the same track as it was during Hasina's time. But is there any one particular thing that India can do to sort of at least revive some of the relationship with whoever comes in?
There is an issue about this also. If you look at the Professor Yunus or some of the other leaders, they've been saying very positive things about India. Like, India is the most important neighbor. There is no way that we can work in the region or otherwise without India. All kinds of positive remarks from day one. But I've noticed down the line, there seems to be a kind of hesitancy about India's role. So even the recent example, which I keep giving, is when, this unfortunate air crash happened in the school. Bangladesh requested India to send a medical team. Now, when the medical team arrived in Bangladesh, they were told, you don't have the requirements, academic qualification to examine patients. You can observe them, but you can't treat patients. That was the word they were used. Of course, it changed when the Chinese delegation arrived, and then, of course, the other third delegation arrived. So I'm saying, and and there were many other instances also. We can go into details later, where we've seen while at the higher level, the leaders are constantly saying that Bangladesh, India needs to work together. India is an important neighbor, critical neighbor, but down the line, there is a hesitancy about India's role. So clearly, we have to break that. That will take time. I think right now we'll really have to look at it issue based, ensure, that's the mention that, while there are many good things that India and Bangladesh have done over the last 10, 12, 15 years, but because of the few cobwebs that they have, everything's washed over, that you tend to only remember the negative things. So let's take a break here and see that how we can reset the relationship. We can't go back to the earlier bonhomie that we had. It's natural. We have to change. Their domestic situation is changing. We'll have to move with the time. So I think we'll have to be very, very clear as to how we can, like for example, the Sri Lanka case, right? We had issues, but we gave them that support, and things started changing. We, for the first time, we didn't even recognize him as a leader earlier. We called AKD to Delhi even before elections. So clearly India was reading the ground correctly there. So similarly, I think India, of course, right now they're looking at elections, but I think conveying an intent that we want to work for mutual benefit. It's not a one-sided relation. India will logically argue it's not one-sided, we've not done that, but the perception is always so important. And, politics is all based on these emotive perceptions.
Very difficult to change.
Yes, it is something which is very deep, very complex, but I'm sure with the right intentions, it's possible.
On that note, we have to close this particular interview. Thank you so much for, clarifying what India-Bangladesh relations are all about. That was Dr. Sreeradha Datta talking to us about events in Bangladesh and what India can do to help bring things back on track. I do hope you enjoyed this particular edition of The Gist, and I look forward to seeing you again. This is Ramananda Sengupta.